Hello everyone, it is I, Ned the Cheese. Today in this short video I'm going to be teaching you how to make cheese. So in about 5 minutes time you'll all be amazing cheesemongers and can get going. So the first thing you need to make cheese is milk. Here, in case you've forgotten what it looks like, is some lovely milk. This is actually some lovely raw unpasteurised milk from a friend of mine. I'm just going to try some. Yum. So anyway, cheese making is magic because we get this liquid milk, which is quite nice but doesn't taste all that interesting, and we turn it into cheese, a solid with a much more interesting flavour. So the simplest form of cheese making, which I think has been going on for about 9,000 years, is that you get your milk. Milk is full of lactose, milk sugar. Then you need a starter culture. We call it that because it starts the process of cheese making. It's a bacterial culture, lactophilic culture. It loves lactose, it loves milk sugar. You add this to the milk. It starts converting the lactose to lactic acid, souring the milk. And at this point, it's actually beginning to separate the solids, the curds, from the whey. So you could, at that point, drain off this cheese and have a kind of very soft, very simple cheese. Wouldn't have much of a form, a lot of moisture. So you can't age things so much when they're high in moisture. So you wouldn't get that interesting a flavour. So the next step is to add rennet. Rennet is an enzyme that coagulates milk by knitting the milk proteins together. This is a mime of the casein matrix, the milk proteins being knitted together. You knit these proteins together and you drain off more of the whey using a cheese mould. So here is a cheese mould for a very simple style of soft cheese. You'll notice this one's made of plastic, but if you go to the Archaeology Museum in Lisbon, as I like to do of an evening, you will see Neolithic cheese moulds that look very similar to this. So in 9,000 years, there's been very little change in some of the technology we use, which is also magic. So there's your mould. You've poured you ladled your curd into the mould, you drain it off, and you'd end up with something like this. This is a very simple, soft, fresh goat's cheese from Herefordshire, made by a man called Charlie Westhead. Lovely man, lovely cheese. So that will have simple, fresh, delicate flavours because it's still quite young. If we want to age the cheese more to produce a more complex flavour, we need to do some more stuff to the curd while it's in the vat. So the first thing we would do is to cut the curd. Your curd in the vat is a texture a bit like jelly or like a creme caramel. You can cut this with a many-bladed knife, which proper cheesemakers call a cheese harp. You're making these cuts through the vat and you're draining off more of this liquid whey. You would also heat the curd a bit at this point to further remove whey and also kind of get the curd to be a bit tougher so that you can then make a harder cheese with it. So here's a lovely example of a hard cheese. This is Westcombe cheddar, made by the lovely Tom Calver in Somerset. And you can see, obviously, this is a much harder texture. It's also been pressed. So you put this in a cheese press. In the old days, they'd use a heavy stone. These days, you use hydraulics. That's pressing out more moisture, knitting the curd together to make a nice, dense, hard cheese that you can keep for longer. So with our piroche, we'd want to eat that within a few days of making it, really. If we kept it for a week or two, it would grow a rind and become a mould-ripened cheese like Camembert, a whole other thing. This cheese we could keep in our barn or our cellar for a year or even 2 years. And in that time, it will ripen and develop much more complexity. Now, there are literally thousands of different cheeses in the world, and I'm just presenting 3 at the moment. We'll do plenty more as we go on with these videos. But another example of cheese making is obviously a blue cheese. This one is a Stilton style called Stilton, made by the lovely Joe Schneider. Now here what you have is blue mould that's been encouraged to grow in the cheese. The blue mould is called Penicillin Roqueforti, after Roquefort cheese, because the French are great at nabbing the names, making them their own. But you need to do a few things to make a blue cheese different from your hard cheese. One thing is that you want to make a more moist, open curd, so the blue's got room to grow. You wouldn't press the cheese because you're keeping that nice open curd again to allow the blue mould room to develop. The blue mould needs oxygen to grow. So the way you encourage the growth is to pierce your cheese. Now you can see these little holes here. This is because Joe's put his cheeses into a thing like a sort of tiny Iron Maiden, slightly unnerving, but he pierces them. You can see where the rods have gone in here, and you can kind of see the blue growing along those piercings. Now, one thing that I thought when I was a younger monger is that, you know, the more technical a cheese is, the later it came in the development of cheese making. But actually, I no longer think this is true. I think that these must have been the first forms of cheese, you know, about 8,000, 9,000 years ago. But only a couple of thousand years after that, a mere blink in history, people were making hard cheeses in Greece and the Mediterranean. And I also think blue cheese is very ancient too. Now, if you look at this lovely bit of Westcombe, you can see a little vein there, the kind of blue shades, and some blue mould is just naturally growing in there. This is the sign of a good, authentic cheddar, by the way. So I reckon that blue came along naturally. Cheesemakers, being inquisitive types and quite brave, tried some of it and thought, this is amazing, how do I do that? So they figured out the way to make this kind of blue cheese. So I don't think, what I do think is that even cheese like this has probably been around at least 1,000 years, if not more. So that's 3 out of the thousands of types of cheese there are in the world. Now you know how to make cheese. Stick around and I'll tell you some more stuff about cheese. Thank you very much.